Welcome to the channel where all you got to do is tram in a Bridgeport head. So before we start doing any light cutting, we need to make sure this head's trammed in. So this is probably fairly close, but let's double check it. So nobody really teaches you how to do this, but there's definitely a method that's a lot faster than if you don't know what you're doing. So first thing you need to know is it pivots from the center here. So if you tilt it like that and like that, it's going to be the same amount up and down. Right? If you tilt it, this goes up 2 thou, this goes down 2 thou, or vice versa. If you do it this way, it pivots from back here. So essentially it's not pivoting the same. So this distance, if you go, some degree, it might be 10 thousandths here, and over here it's going to be 2 thou, right? Because it's so much closer to the pivot point. So what you need to do, all you got to do is get this one and this one correct. And then there's no possible way it can be wrong if you get 3 points, right? So you don't have to swing this all the way. If you get that, equivalent to that, and then make this one the same, you're done. So that's what we're going to do. So let's see where we are. Okay, so there's 0. Always use the knee, which is this part, to adjust your Z. Okay, so there's 0. Come over here. It is most definitely not 0. It's about 5 thousandths. So what we need to do is loosen these guys up here. Not completely loose, otherwise it'll just clunk. There's a worm drive here that allows you to move it. But you need to maintain a little bit of tension on these guys or else it'll just go. Yeah, so now we're actually a little closer, just loosening those up. We're about 3 thousandths on the minus side there. And still about a 0.5 tenths over here on the minus side. So don't really need to know which way you're going, just pick a direction. It's probably going to be wrong, but yep. That's okay. So we were off by about 3, so let's move this about half of that, which is nice with this technique. Okay, it's about 1.5. We'll set that back to 0. 0. And we're at about a 0.5 thou on this side. Which is pretty good, but not good enough for me. Alright. The other thing you want to make sure when you're doing this, before you tram the Y-axis, you want to make sure you're the same distance from the table, right? Because if this thing is really far off, then the difference between here and here is quite a bit. So try to keep that pretty close. Okay, so we're 0 there. We're like about 1/4 inch away from the edge of the table. And we're about a 0.5 thou the other way now, which is okay. When you're using this whole depth of the quill, it's really important that you get this thing trammed in, otherwise you're trying to drill essentially holes on an angle. The short hole doesn't really matter that much, or a short end mill, but if you start getting into drilling long holes or using big fly cutters like we're going to do machining this head, then you got a problem. 0. Alright, so we're 0, 0. Now, we're not done because we got to tighten these bolts up. When we tighten these bolts up, that's going to want to move. So you got to kind of baby these and make sure the needle doesn't move while you're tightening them. Just kind of be cognizant that everything's a spring. Alright. So this hasn't moved. It's still at 0. And that's still at 0. So we got X right. Now we got to make sure Y is correct. And of course, it's about an hour and a half off. So now we got to loosen these 3 bolts over here. People ask why you have to do this. The answer is we don't live in a perfect world. If this thing gets hot and cold, this was designed in the 30s. It isn't really designed to be stable at different temperatures, so everything moves around a little bit. Clean temperature, soak temperature on today is about 80 degrees versus, in the middle of winter when it's 50. It's going to be a little bit different. So, also if you make some big cuts or have a little accident where you run into something on accident, yeah, you could bend it a little bit. Okay, so we put that on 0, but that doesn't mean we're done. We got to go back because this pivot is from here to here, so this moved, right? So just because this is at 0, this isn't at 0 anymore. This will have moved, right? So now this was a thou and a half, and we moved it to make it 0. Now this is a little over a thou and a tenth or so. So we make that 0, and we're off a little bit, and the ratio is not. It's dependent on where this table is, how far it's sticking out, right? So I'm not going to tell you it's this percentage because it's always different. Depending on what you're doing, you just have to be cognizant that the pivot is far, far away. And alright, so that's about a half thou. The other thing you have to be aware of is I loosened this up here, and so this thing could have tilted a little bit when I loosened those bolts up. So now I'm measuring between here and here. It's like a couple of tenths. So not a huge amount for a Bridgeport, but it's a little bit. So bring that back to 0. Yeah, that's like 3/10. Depending on how good you want to do this, you rinse and repeat. So this is 0, this is 0, this is 3/10. Of course, when I tighten these bolts back up, we don't know where it's going to go, but we will check it. It's just like the flow bench. You don't know what you got until you check it. Alright, so let's see where we're at. Okay, that's 0. It's still 3/10. And that's 3/10. 2/10. I call that good. Thanks for watching. If you like this content and want more, subscribe, like, and share.